Hello and welcome to In Conclusion. Believe it or not, they let me on TV for another week. I'm Kejan Haynes. All right, so we have a great show tonight, so let's get started. It was actually a pretty slow news week. The Prime Minister once again making history, some may say, for all the wrong reasons, announcing that she's going to launch a motion of no confidence into the opposition leader. Rhea Tate wrote a great article that spelled out what the Prime Minister had done, which is essentially nothing. She says, the bottom line is that a motion of no confidence can only have constitutional effect in circumstances where the person enjoyed the confidence of the majority in the first place. But this was by far my favorite story of the week. It was by CNC3's Kamal Georges that left us hungry for more.
The amateur video sent to CNC3 was reported by a male student showing what many at El Dorado East Secondary School say is evidence of theft of food and drinks intended for students.
Yeah, juice, please. No. Yes, sir? No. Soccer, yeah, juice, please. No. So why, sir? I want to create our juice there, sir.
Now, whether or not this is new to you, Lord knows when I went to school there was something of a box lunch mafia. But what you have to love about this story is that Mr. Georges found a way to use the citizen journalists, if you will, to gain access to a school where, the media is usually prohibited from entering schools. And it was also a great way to see the students use their cell phones for more than just recording themselves fighting. They saw an issue and they brought it to the media. And this is the sort of interaction that journalists always want with the general public. So good on him and good on them. The Ministry of Education is investigating this, by the way. One day we hope to get CNC3 journalists on set to discuss their stories. But just when I thought that the media actually went through an entire week without doing anything that makes you, shake your head, The Guardian pulling this one out to the last minute on Thursday. Their back page, that's Sports Minister Brent Sancho and Jacine Phillip at the new cycling centre in Couva, to which Dr. Rowley said, "It good." But, that's just because I think I'm also 6 years old. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So the Sunday Express kicked off the week with a three-part investigation into the National Gas Company. Asha Javid reported that the Corporate Communications Department budget, it ballooned from $67 million in 2012 to almost $200 million in 2014. And of course, in part two, we found out that the company spent $20.4 million on reputation and branding. And then in part three, we learned that a project under their Community Economic Development budget had doubled. But while NGC ducked and weaved the questions from the Express, NGC's president Indar Maraj did end up giving a statement to CNC3's Judy Kanai on Monday night.
Mr. Maraj justifies the expenditure of his communications department. He says, quote, NGC's policy is to budget no more than 3% of our profits before tax, but capped at a maximum of $200 million as corporate social investment expenditure.
Now, he also told Kanai that as far as he knows, the policy began back in 2013. However, he wouldn't go into detail about the audit.
The NGC president tells CNC3 Business Watch that a planned audit of the communications department is in the process by the Internal Audit Department. He says it has not been completed or presented to management. He says, quote, we cannot comment on any issues that may arise from the audit until the report is finalized.
Now, of course, since then, the company has taken out several full-page ads in all of the daily newspapers condemning the reportage, instead of responding to the reporters' emailed requests for comments. And, of course, the ads talk about the audit being incomplete, and they've demanded an apology from the Express in the next Sunday Express. They've also called for an apology from the Express. But this was Larry Hawaii speaking on the issue on TV6's Morning Edition on Friday.
Through the line minister, right? Because the line minister is the Minister of Energy. I need to see a report. I've said to the media also, look, let's not jump to conclusions. I'm not suggesting that the report that the journalist had written was incorrect or anything like that, or the facts were wrong. I'm not casting blame on either side.
All right, so we wanted to get Asher Javid on set to discuss the stories, but our attorneys have advised against it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is In Conclusion. So the government, through the Ministry of Communications, has launched a rapid response and current affairs unit to assist the state in better communicating its responses to the media. But what exactly does that mean? I have no idea. So that is why we have the executive of the unit and former CEO of GISL, Andy Johnson, here to talk to us about it. Andy, welcome to the show and welcome back to the TV6 set. I mean, I know it's a little different for you, but
to these premises, yes. Thank you very much, Kejan.
Anyway, changing around. I'm asking the question now.
Yes.
So what is this unit about, and how does this differ from the numerous communications departments that the government will already have?
You mean
each ministry has
right.
its own communications department. So how does your department work?
Right. So it is meant for us to, in the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Investment and Communications, take an overall view of government communications right across the board and determine a lot of times, even with all those different communications outlets and arms and so on, sometimes some things get under the rug or sometimes some things go by without being addressed in a manner that has been observed over the course of a period of time looking at them. So this is to add some grease to the wheel, as it were, and to try and be a coordinating agency for government communication across ministries.
So is this just for the election campaign, or is this supposed to be now a new statewide initiative? How is that supposed to work?
Yes, it's not about elections at all, because I will tell you that it is something that I had some thoughts about for a long time.
And so what's the difference between this and just having a Minister of Communications or a press secretary, like both of which this government has had?
There's a press secretary for the Prime Minister. This is that person that speaks and does things concerning the Prime Minister and the office of the Prime Minister almost exclusively.
Right.
But then there's the rest of the government to be looked after. And so that is something that I'd proposed even before I left GISL, and it was agreed upon, which is why I left. Part of the reason why I left and came to sort of transferred to the ministry to work more directly with the minister, because just take the fact that Minister Bharat is responsible for trade, industry, investments, and communications. So this is to beef up his support, and he has the responsibility for coordinating responses.
So in cases like this, if I'm not getting information from, let's say, the Ministry of Education's communications department, do I now go to you? Do you supersede everybody else's communications department?
No, I won't put it as superseding.
Is it their power?
I won't put it as superseding, but we'll try and sort of put some fuel into the pipeline and try and understand what is the issue with the Ministry of Education. Try to make direct contact with the Minister of Education, either directly or through the Minister responsible for communication.
So does that mean now the media can expect a timeline, a deadline? So let's say with this whole NGC issue, maybe if we wanted the Minister of Finance to come on the show and he was taking a bit too long, maybe. Is this what you do? And you say, well, listen, everybody needs to respond within a week or 2 days. What is the rapid?
What is reasonable,
yeah,
as quickly as possible? And I'm glad you raised the issue with the Minister of Finance, because precisely what he did there in response to the story as it broke in the Express was to come on. I imagine that he would, and he is one of those ministers who was not reticent or hesitant to address issues frontally up front, and I imagine he would have agreed to come on as soon as he could to address the issue. Now, if I had it to do, I would be encouraging the people at the NGC to come and engage with the Express and with TV6 on the story. Never mind, the story broke here, and that is a part of our culture that I believe that we have to address. So one agency.
About that before we get in trouble with our legal department, but wouldn't it have been just easier to improve the conditions, improve the efficiency of the ministry's communications department? I mean, does your ministry now add a whole new cost for the government?
Not necessarily, because you see, the communications departments in each ministry, they have many things that they're dealing with that doesn't necessarily have to do with responding to media on particular issues in a timely fashion. They would have, the minister would have his own schedule, whether it's, if you take the Minister of Education, opening schools, addressing PTAs, you know, and a whole range of other things that they would be involved in, making sure everything is right for that. His visit to wherever, you know, the Penal Day Bay School or the Maracas St. Joseph School to see about fixing desks and chairs and treating with NPA and PT.
Now I'm going to be controversial with you, Randy. How would you respond to claims? Because I'm sure a lot of people will say this is just maybe like a make-work program. Your 10 days, right, as it stands.
Not at all, because it is seen, it's critical. And you see, the other part of it is that's half of it. Responding directly is one part of it, because there's the other part of it where, again, let's take the NGC issue, for instance. So that a story was put out and the people at the NGC may have felt injured. No, I'm raising it. It's a real legitimate issue. They may have felt injured by it. The idea, what we are saying in this unit, is less engaged, so that a story went out there that may have had some inaccuracies or been taken out of context. The idea is to engage, and so we will say, well, look, here's our side of the story. This is something that you needed to put into context, to treat within the story. You get a fuller sense of it.
But you might be approaching this from a journalistic perspective. You're a journalist, and you, in your heart, you know, you probably always want that two sides to every story.
Yes.
But a government official may not want that. They may want to bury the story for as long as possible. So now, do you think that you might be at loggerheads with your own ministers?
Well, the minister responsible for communication, like I said, he bought the idea, and he said to me that it was an idea that was accepted in the cabinet from the Prime Minister down when he took it there, because they felt that somebody like me could help do that and help get the fuller picture. Like I say, a lot of times, I hear people talking on the radio and on TV, some programs sometimes on a regular basis, discussing issues having to do with the government's performance or images of the Prime Minister and other ministers. And a lot of times the information is half of what it should be. Sometimes it's totally way off base.
So does that mean we can now expect you to start storming radio stations and correcting the issues right away?
Not storming. The idea that we discussed in the launch was precisely we wanted to put this mechanism in place and get buy-in from
and as all this information, are you going to ensure, again, back to your journalistic principles, that everything that the government now releases is accurate and factual, and we can rest and say, okay, yes, this is what is the truth and not just spin?
Well, I don't want to turn the tables on you, but I would like you to tell me where you have seen or heard a government minister or government official providing information that you said, well, this is not true.
Well, there's always spin. But Andy, we're gonna take a break, and you're gonna stick around, right? Because we're covering political campaigns next. So we're gonna take a break. Andy will be with us, and we have Wesley Gibbings as well. This is In Conclusion.
Yeah, man. Good.
All right, welcome back. So I was hoping to wait a few weeks before discussing this topic, but with 3 political meetings this week and the UNC's Monday night forum in full swing, it's clear that the campaign season has begun. So how do we in the media cover political campaigns? For many journalists working today, it'll actually be their first general election. So to talk about this, we have the General Secretary of the Association for Caribbean Media Workers, Wesley Gibbings, and Andy Johnson has stuck around. He's going to talk to us about his experience. Welcome, gentlemen. Well, welcome. Wesley, let's start with you. I understand that as early as this week, there's supposed to be a forum for journalists to discuss covering political campaigns. Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the ACM has been involved in this kind of exercise throughout the region, because we have long recognized that there is an undoubted connection between the integrity of the electoral process and media performance. The acceptability of electoral outcomes, the integrity of the electoral process, the practice of the political parties and all the official agencies all come into question around these seasons. And strong media performance at this time is absolutely important in order to preserve the process.
And a lot of what people are going to be looking at, as you said, is our strong media performance. And there are going to be a lot of people probably, presumably, attacking the media. So how do journalists now respond to this? Do you ignore the attacks, or do you come right out, like Andy said, create your own rapid response unit and respond to the attacks from bloggers or whoever?
Well, you certainly need to be alert to the feedback to the work that you're doing, because some of the criticisms and the comments would be quite valid, and the media need to pay attention to these things and to take action to address them. But at the same time, you can't become overly distracted by the negative comments that you're going to get, sometimes from the political platform. I mean, people who have been around this for some time, and Andy is one such person, it's par for the course that you are going to fall under critical attention by the political combatants, and it's a matter of, one, having a thick skin in terms of the personal attacks, but also to pay attention to what they're saying, because sometimes they have a point that you need to address.
And so you would have been, I'll call you a little old school, but you would have been in the era when, I'm assuming, you went to every political meeting. Nowadays, you can kind of watch it from TV because it's on every TV station, it's on the radio, it's online. What is the difference between going to a political rally, a political meeting, and just watching it from TV and covering the story?
Huge differences, you know. I take a phrase from one of my mentors, Lennox Grant. I read a piece that he had written some years ago. I can't remember the issue he was writing about, but he was quoting Robin Montano as having said something, and he quoted the exact phrase, and I asked him, well, how did you remember that? He said, there's nothing that beats being there. And you know, I frown on the idea of covering something off of a TV screen, whatever it is, whether it's the Parliament, whatever it is, whether it's the Commission of Inquiry and those kinds of things. Being there is, you know, is its own recommendation. You get the sense of the event as it is taking place. You can't feel the energy, and you can't. That inspires you a lot of times to watch how what is being said is received, responded to by the people who are there taking it in live. And let me just say something. You know, add something from what Wesley said. They were having a thick skin. You know, I've sort of collated what I consider to be, and what I share with either young aspirants or young reporters about what it requires, what it takes to do this job. And one of them is to have a thick skin. And at election time, you need to put on that thick skin and to develop it even thicker than for normal course of time. Because in election times, you know, tensions get heightened.
Well, exactly.
You know,
and that's what I want. Now, tensions are heightened. Now, if you are going to a political meeting, now there's also safety issues involved, because if you show up at a political meeting, I've heard stories of journalists, you know, being attacked by the crowd or yelled at by the crowd. So how do you balance that? You know, covering the story, but managing your safety at the same time.
Just don't answer back. A lot of times, sometimes don't engage the people, because people will be friends with you or neutral towards you for 4.5 years. From the time the election season sets in, they begin to see you as an antagonist. If they believe that, you know, you or your media house is not in their camp.
Right.
And
so is it as simple as just...
And it's the same basic guideline for covering any form of conflict, for example, where you set yourself apart from the major combatants. You have to use quite a lot of common sense on the spot. You have to be equipped, of course. Press identification is very important. I know that press passes have saved lives and you know, kept people in good physical shape. So you need to be pretty smart about it. And this thing about monitoring campaign from a television screen, that's not on. You cannot be being on the spot.
But of course, you're dealing with several more parties. Now you have the COP now having their own political meetings. You have the ILP, and all of these things are happening on the same night, and the resources haven't grown. It's still the same. So there's nothing really that we could do about it. At some point, you have to sit down and watch tape.
You can start by devoting a few more resources. There are freelance journalists around the place who I'm sure would be pretty happy for the gig. And in addition to which, you could confront the editorial problem of whom do you cover on a particular evening?
No, that's
with given.
Yeah. That's something I want to ask, though.
Yeah, but also let me just make this point that at election time, many reporters for whom politics is not their regular beat,
they have to
get thrown in because at the end of the day, it's covering a story with the basics of how you cover a story.
Let me ask you something. If you're an assignment editor, do you have one person cover a political party, or do you ensure that, let's say today I'm covering the UNC, tomorrow I have to cover the PNM, so that nobody can brand me a UNC journalist or a PNM journalist?
Well, there are. Well, I don't know if you wanted to comment, but there are things to be said. There are pros and cons on both sides, because sometimes if you embed, as the case has been, one reporter with one side, that person then develops with the skill and confidence based on your reporting, develops rapport with people, sometimes not only the frontline speakers, but you get to people in the belly of that organization, and you could get insights that will be useful. People begin to trust you, and will talk with you, give you background, and sort of point you in different directions and so on. But sometimes it's good to mix it up.
Right.
So that,
I agree entirely with Andy. I remember we covered 1986 election together, and we were assigned we were assigned political parties to cover. But I know that on occasion, the news editor, and you were the news editor at the time?
In 86,
in 86, yes. We would deliberately be shifted around, because the downside of this is sometimes you become embedded in the political organizations and you develop your
affinity for the thing.
So it's good to circulate people, even as you assign them specific beats in terms of the political parties they cover, but to rotate it so they get a feel for the full picture.
All right, hold that thought. I want you all to stick around. We want to discuss this online. But that is our show for the television version of In Conclusion. If you can check us out at www.tv6tnt.com. You're going to see the rest of this interview with Andy Johnson and Wesley Gibbings. That's our show. Thank you very much for joining us. See us next week at 7:30 on TV6. Welcome back. This is the online edition, and we're talking political coverage. All right, gentlemen. So there's an election handbook for journalists. What is the first thing that a young journalist covering their first election needs to know?
I think that all journalists need to understand that an election process constitutes or comprises a number of distinct elements, and they need to be acquainted with all of those elements. Some elements refer to the pre-election process, some elements relate to election day, and they're very important elements that attach to what happens after the election. As we would recall in our 1818 experience here, a lot of people thought, well, okay, they go home and they're done, election done.
Right,
but the election process had not been completed.
And then you have the runoff this year, possibly.
And then you have the runoff, and so on. And I mean, we've just come through the experience in St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, where the electoral results became were inconclusive, even though you were dealing with an electorate of 30,000 people. So these things need to be put into the mix. All journalists need to have a very sound understanding of all of the processes that go into an election.
And how do we deal with facts? We cover a story sometimes and we say, well, the Prime Minister said X, Y, Z. But sometimes she could have said something that's absolutely wrong. So if we're covering a story, do we just say the Prime Minister was wrong? Or do we say, well, the Prime Minister said it, and then throw our hands up and say, well, I didn't say that, she said it?
Now, once the point is made on a platform, on a public platform, it is reportable. I mean, unless it is so obviously exceedingly egregious. This is what the Prime Minister, whoever said about this or that, and that is reported, and then it goes for checking. The next day somebody will respond, or you will check it out to see whether that is the case, and you juxtapose what was said on the platform with what you find out, which may have been in contradiction to that.
But sometimes you don't even have time. So how does that work? Now that we're supposed to start using these things online, start tweeting while the Prime Minister is speaking? How do you now involve that?
Notwithstanding the immediacy of social media, I think that the old rule of when in doubt, leave out needs to apply. But in terms of verification, in some countries there are processes for fact-checking, for example. Yeah. And it goes even into media houses, whether they're in a competitive environment or not, collaborating with respect to building banks of data and information against which journalists can double-check. So you have the basic economic indicators, for example. Right, is something 3% or is it 5%, as the minister just said on the platform? Right. So those are ways of addressing it.
All right, guys. So thanks very much for sticking around. This was the online version of In Conclusion. You can catch our show every Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. on TV6. I'm Kejan Haynes. Goodbye.